Hey guys, tonight we journey to a world of damp straw beds, communal soup pots, and more daily indignities than your worst Monday. We're heading back to the Middle Ages, not as a knight or a lady in a tower, but as a regular woman, a peasant, and not a cute Disney movie peasant either. You live in a one-room house with your entire family, and sometimes your goats, and you probably haven't had a proper bath since last Easter. It's pitch black when you first open your eyes. The fire's gone cold. Your feet are tangled in a rough wool blanket that smells like wet dog, and someone's elbow is in your ribs. That would be your husband, snoring with cheerful oblivion, his breath ripe with last night's onions and ale. You can hear one of the children wheezing, another one murmuring in sleep, and yes, that scratching noise near your head? Probably a rat, or just the pig again. You sleep inside with the livestock for warmth after all. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start your day by sitting up very slowly because your spine feels like it's been trampled by a mule. There's no mattress, just a lumpy sack of straw crawling with tiny bugs called bed lice. No alarm clock, of course. The rooster does that job, and he's already shouting like he's paid hourly. The air smells like ash, sweat, and a little bit of something sour. That's normal. You pull on the same shift you wore yesterday and the day before. You only own two, one for wear, one for wash. And washing happens less often than you'd prefer, mainly because soap is a luxury item. You splash your face with cold water from a bucket in the corner, careful not to use too much. Hauling water is a chore for later. The floor is packed dirt, the ceiling beams creak with every gust of wind, and a draft slips in through the wattle walls like a rude ghost. You're already shivering, even under layers. There's a good chance you woke up with a mild respiratory infection. Again. Historians still argue whether medieval women had any concept of germ theory at all, or if everyone just blamed bad air or moral failings. Either way, you'll ignore the cough. You don't have time for illness. If you're lucky, there's a fire still smoldering in the hearth. If not, you fumble around in the darkness to rekindle it with flint, praying that the damp kindling catches. Matches won't be invented for another several centuries, so you're going full caveman here. Your kids start to stir, whining for food. They sleep on a pallet beside you, piled like puppies. One wets the bed. Again. You wipe it with a rag and mutter a few unprintable words. Don't worry, swearing is very period accurate. In fact, by God's bones is a favorite medieval curse, though it might get you a fine if said too close to the church. A fringe fact for you. Some households kept a communal bucket for nighttime relief. Yes, that means urine and feces, which got tossed out the door in the morning. There's no outhouse, no privacy, and definitely no toilet paper. Moss or hay will do, if you're upper class. Wool scraps. Congratulations. While you sweep out the ashes and toss the waste, you catch your reflection in a pot lid. Your hair's a disaster. Greasy, braided, and full of straw. Hair washing is rare and reserved for special occasions like festivals, weddings, or if someone important dies. Plus, there's always the risk of catching a cold from wet hair, and let's be honest, colds kill people here. There's no mirror, no toothpaste, and if you're missing teeth, which many women start doing by their 20s, it's just part of your look. You chew bread that's sometimes adulterated with ground-up chalk to make it seem more filling. Historians still debate how widespread these food forgeries were, but people definitely got creative or desperate. Your husband finally grunts awake. He farts loudly and scratches himself in places you wish he wouldn't. You sigh. Romantic spark? You left that behind when your last child was born in the hayloft during a thunderstorm. The midwife had been drunk, and someone mistook your labor screams for a banshee. You throw a cloth over your head, not for fashion, but because head coverings are mandatory. Modesty, piety, and protection from lice, all in one. Women not wearing veils in town might be mistaken for sex workers or heretics, and those categories can overlap dangerously. Speaking of danger, you might have to walk half a mile just to fetch water, all while fending off men with questionable intentions. Sexual assault wasn't just common, it was usually unpunished. You keep a stick in your hand, just in case. Outside, the village is waking up. Smoke rises from thatched roofs. Chickens squawk, pigs wander, and someone's child is already crying. Again, a neighbor calls out that someone's cow has gotten loose. You pretend not to hear. You've got your own problems. You mentally check today's to-do list. Cook, clean, spin wool, feed the animals, weed the garden, maybe help that old woman down the road give birth to her 9th baby. You hope she doesn't die this time. 1 in 3 women don't make it through childbirth. And as you tiptoe across the freezing floorboards, careful not to step on a chicken, you whisper to yourself that maybe, just maybe, today will be different. It won't. The first chore of the day isn't breakfast, it's water. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders, grit your teeth, and step outside into the frigid morning. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the mist has. It clings to the ground like a damp curse, and every step sinks a little into cold mud. No boots, of course, just worn leather shoes with holes in the soles that make you feel each pebble like a tiny insult from the earth itself. You walk to the village well, a heavy wooden bucket swinging from your calloused hand. The well is communal, and the line has already started. Old Mother Agnes is there, muttering a prayer as she lowers her bucket. Someone else has brought 2 barrels on a yoke, showing off. And there's the local drunk, asleep against the fence, snoring into a puddle. No one wakes him. It's too early for conversation. While you wait, you stamp your feet for warmth. The chickens in the nearby pen cluck disapprovingly. Your shawl doesn't do much to stop the chill. You glance around. There are pigs rooting through the street muck, children chasing each other barefoot, and a neighbor loudly berating her husband for selling her butter without asking. Again. When it's finally your turn, you crank the winch, arms straining against the frozen rope. It groans like it's in pain. The bucket descends into the darkness, clinks against the stone walls, and after an eternal pause, comes up sloshing and icy. You spill some on your toes. Of course, you mumble something rude under your breath. This water, you'll need it for cooking, washing, and probably drinking, after boiling if there's firewood. That's a whole separate errand. Wood doesn't just appear in the hearth after all. You have to collect it, chop it, and guard it like treasure. In some places, forests are controlled by lords, and collecting fallen branches without permission is punishable. Historians still argue whether such restrictions were universally enforced or just selectively brutal. Either way, you don't risk it. Back home, your husband has done absolutely nothing except scratch himself and complain about his knees. You try to stay patient. This is your life partner. You were likely married around 14, and not because you chose to. Your parents negotiated a deal. Perhaps a goat or a sack of barley changed hands. Love wasn't on the table. Survival was. There's no time for bitterness. You use the water to heat some porridge over the embers, scraping the bottom of the pot. It's barley again. It's always barley. Maybe with a little onion for flavor, if you're lucky. Salt? That's a dream. Sugar? A myth whispered by merchants. The kids wolf down their share with sticky fingers, already fighting. You hand one a piece of stale bread to chew on. It's harder than a rock, but keeps them quiet. Now it's time to dress for the day. Not that you were undressed to begin with, but the outer layers matter. First, a wool kirtle, itchy, faded, and patched at the hem. Over that, an apron to protect the only decent dress you own. You fasten it with wooden pins and hope they don't snap. Metal ones are rare, expensive. Jewelry? Forget it. Maybe a wooden cross around your neck if you're devout, or want people to think you are. You glance at the mirror again, then remember, you don't have one. Your reflection lives in the water bucket, warped and wobbly. Your hair goes under a coif, your head under a veil, and your expression is already tired. A quirky tidbit. Some women used natural dyes, like crushed beetles or madder root, to add color to their lips or cheeks, especially in towns. It wasn't makeup as we think of it, more like occasional flair. But too much rouge, and you'd be accused of vanity or worse. No one wants to get called a painted woman. As you herd the kids outside and get ready to face the field work, you glance at the sky. Clouds. Again. Rain means mud, which means everything takes twice as long. But you go anyway, because the land needs weeding, the herbs need picking, and someone's got to milk the neighbor's goat while she recovers from last week's fever. Your husband grabs a hoe and lumbers after you, complaining the whole way. He'll work the Lord's strip fields today, long rectangles divided among tenants. You've got your own plot, small and stubborn, where turnips struggle and leeks try to survive. It's not glamorous, but it feeds your children. By the time you reach your plot, your arms ache and your back is already protesting. You kneel in the dirt, clawing at weeds with frozen fingers. There's a rhythm to it, almost meditative. You lose yourself in the tug-pull of roots and the scrape of stone against skin. The village reeve passes by, barking orders. He's always watching, always counting. You lower your head. He once accused you of stealing an egg, even though it was your hen. You didn't argue. No one ever wins against a reeve. Your stomach growls. Again. It always does. Food is fuel, and there's never enough. You can't snack. There is no snacking. Every crumb is accounted for. Every slice of bread must stretch. Sometimes you chew herbs to trick your body into thinking it's eaten. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants were constantly malnourished or just lived in a state of perpetual near hunger. The answer? Probably both. A bad harvest means famine. A good harvest means you might have cheese once a week. As noon approaches, you straighten up, spine crackling like dry twigs. You wipe your hands on your apron, smear dirt on your cheek, and trudge back toward the village, bucket in hand. Your feet are soaked. Your hands are raw. And the worst part? This is the easy part of your day. You sigh, glance back at the fields, and whisper the same silent promise you've made for years. Just keep everyone alive until winter ends. You don't get to sit down. Not really. Not in the way you'd like. But for a few blessed minutes after trudging back from the fields, you pause to change into your inside layer, meaning you loosen your apron, wipe your hands on your skirt, and take a long moment to scratch under your armpit, because your chemise is made of unbleached linen that's been washed maybe twice this month. Maybe. It's itchy. You try not to think about it. Everyone itches. Fleas, lice, mites. They're just part of the scenery. You occasionally catch a glimpse of one hopping across your sleeve like it pays rent. Dressing for the day isn't about looking good. It's about protection against wind, sun, gossip. Your outer garments, the kirtle, the apron, the veil, act like a second skin, sometimes a damp one. The wool is coarse and the seams rub under your arms. You don't have undergarments in the modern sense. What you wear under your kirtle is another long shirt, likely with holes in places best left unmentioned. In winter, you wear more layers. In summer, you sweat and complain. The same scratchy dress clings to you no matter the season, darkened under the arms and around the neckline where time and toil have tattooed it. You tie on your belt, likely a woven strip with a loop for carrying things like a knife, maybe a pouch for herbs or salt. Your hands are your best tools, but they're cracked and red from endless washing in ash soap and cold water. Your hair? Plaited if you're ambitious, tucked away under your coif and veil regardless. Only unmarried girls wear their hair loose. You haven't let yours down in years. The veil isn't optional. It's part of your reputation. People talk. And when people talk, things happen. Especially if you're a woman. Here's a weird little tidbit. Some medieval women sewed tiny religious charms or written prayers into the lining of their veils, hoping it might ward off illness or unwanted attention. A whisper of protection nestled in linen. You've thought about doing the same, but parchment is expensive, and ink smells terrible. As you shuffle into the kitchen corner, a glorified fireplace with a few pots, you frown at the hearth. The smoke doesn't vent well. Your eyes sting. Everything smells vaguely of burnt cabbage. The stew pot hangs low and bubbles slowly, promising nothing exciting. Yesterday's turnips, maybe some split peas if you were lucky, and a sprinkling of herbs you gathered from the roadside. You stir it with a wooden spoon older than your eldest child. There's grit at the bottom. You pretend not to notice. When the fire gets too smoky, you wave a scrap of linen at it until it calms down. You cough. Again. Always the cough. In the background, the children squabble over a bone they found in the ashes. One is poking the other with it like a sword. You murmur a half-hearted threat. They ignore you. Dressing your children is an exercise in futility. They wear what fits. Most of the time it's oversized tunics belted with twine, or scraps of fabric held together with hope. Shoes? Optional. They lose them anyway. In colder seasons, you wrap their feet in cloth. Sometimes they chew on it. You try not to think about why. Historians still argue whether peasant families prioritized cleanliness or simply gave up trying. Some evidence suggests there were communal baths in towns, or washing days with song and celebration. Others argue that outside nobility and monasteries, regular bathing was a luxury. You tend to think of water as something you fight, not enjoy. There's a sharp knock at the door. It startles everyone. A neighbor leans in, apron flapping in the wind, her mouth moving a mile a minute. Goody Margot's girl got bit by a mad dog again. You blink. Again? Father says it's divine punishment. She was talking to that trader boy, the one with the beard. You sigh. Of course. Must be punishment. The dog just happened to be rabid too. You nod, give a vague, "Oh dear," and close the door. There's always something. A dog, a demon, a spoiled cheese. Life is basically a series of minor disasters strung together with chores. Back to your meal prep. You break some stale bread into the stew, trying to soften it. The heel of the loaf is so hard you could probably use it as a weapon. You wonder, not for the first time, if anyone's actually died from choking on bread. Probably. But there are worse ways to go. Boils, fevers, and childbirth come to mind. A mainstream fact: the average lifespan for a woman in the Middle Ages hovered around 30 to 35 years, but that's mostly because so many died young. If you made it past childhood and didn't die giving birth, you might live into your 50s. Might. You pour the stew into wooden bowls, handing them out like sacred offerings. You don't eat until the kids do. It's not written anywhere, but that's the rule. You watch them slurp and smile, even the littlest one with the snot crust on her lip. She's your favorite. Don't tell the others. You finally sit, legs aching, spoon in hand. The stew tastes like warm mush. You savor it anyway. Every bite is earned. There's no break after meals. As soon as bowls are licked clean, yes, literally licked, you rinse them in a bucket outside and get back to it. Laundry today? Maybe. It'll freeze on the line, but at least it'll be clean. The wind picks up, the sky darkens, rain soon. You sigh and pull your shawl tighter, muttering a small prayer that it holds off long enough to get the laundry strung. You scratch your arm again and glance down. Yep, definitely a flea. Breakfast isn't so much a meal as it is a ritual in disappointment. You sit by the hearth, hunched on a stool that wobbles when you shift your weight, clutching a wooden bowl of what can only be described as wet sadness. Barley gruel again. No honey, no butter. Just mushy, lukewarm cereal with a faintly smoky flavor from the ash that settled in the pot overnight. You try not to crunch when you chew. The children are louder now. One is poking another with a stick. You're not sure where the stick came from, or how it got in the house, but it's now a weapon of mass annoyance. You mutter a threat about hiding the gruel pot and they settle for 30 seconds. Then the screaming starts again, because someone got a bigger piece of onion. You remind yourself, these are your blessings. These loud, sticky, barefoot blessings who believe dirt is a condiment. As you spoon the last bit of porridge into your mouth, you hear shouting from outside. Not alarmed shouting, just the regular kind. Someone's arguing about turnips again. You sigh into your bowl. Turnips are always involved. Either someone's stolen one, stepped on one, or suggested someone's turnip field is underperforming due to witchcraft, which, to be fair, is plausible. You peek out your doorway, squinting at the muddy lane. Two women are mid-shout, aprons flapping like battle flags. One's waving a wooden spoon with dramatic flair. The other has her hands on her hips, chin thrust forward like a rooster in a pride contest. You close the door. You don't need that kind of energy before lunch. There's no breakfast table in your house, just a bench, the hearth, and a plank nailed to the wall where the kids sometimes sit and drip things. Furniture is sparse, and what you have is wobbly, worm-eaten, or being used by the cat. If you had a cat, which you don't, but if you did, it would sleep directly on the laundry pile and bring you dead mice at 3 a.m. You take the bowls and scrape out what little is left into a pot, mixing in some leftover bits for dinner stew. Nothing is wasted. Not bones, not crusts, not even the water you boiled eggs in. On the rare occasion you have eggs, you use that water to soak bread. It's called broth if you're feeling fancy. Sometimes, on holy days or feast days, breakfast includes meat, or ale, or cheese. But not today. Today is ordinary, and ordinary means porridge. The children dash out, released like hounds, leaving behind a trail of crumbs and dirty smocks. You exhale. You love them. You do. But they are loud and endless, and someone's always sticky. You head outside to start the mid-morning work. There's flax to beat, or wool to card, or herbs to dry. Maybe spinning if your hands stop shaking. Everything you wear must be made, patched, or borrowed. Cloth is currency. Your spindle is smooth from use. You hold it like a prayer. Here's something odd. In some villages, women who spun the fastest were said to be blessed by saints. Others claimed they were too fast, perhaps using magic. Historians still argue whether this suspicion was rooted in religious fear or just envy. Either way, it meant you had to pace yourself. Work too slow and you're lazy. Too fast and you're unnatural. The sweet spot is tired, but not threatening. Back inside, you check your herb bundles hanging from the rafters. Thyme, sage, lavender if you're lucky. You crush a few between your fingers and inhale the scent, one of the rare joys in your day. Smells clean, sharp, makes you feel human. Your youngest toddles in, barefoot and grinning, holding a snail. You suppress the urge to scream. It's alive, slimy. You take it from her gently and place it on the windowsill. That windowsill, by the way, doesn't have glass, just oiled linen stretched across a frame. It lets in light, and cold, and bugs, so many bugs. You wipe her hands with a rag you dipped in ash water. She tries to eat the rag. You intervene. Again. Blessings. The noise outside swells. A cart's broken a wheel. You hear the wheelwright cursing, the reeve yelling. A donkey brays like it's being tickled and tortured simultaneously. You step out to watch the drama unfold. People gather. No one helps. But everyone offers advice. Loudly. You head back inside because you have something more important to worry about. The butter churn. It's your turn. And the butter isn't going to churn itself. You lift the heavy wooden churn, bracing it between your knees, and begin. Up, down, up, down. Your arms ache within seconds. Churning takes forever. The rhythm is hypnotic, though. You hum a bit, an old tune your mother sang when she thought no one was listening. The sound comforts you. Or maybe it's just the distraction from the burn in your shoulders. Once, someone told you that if a woman churned butter on a Sunday, the devil would make it sour. You don't churn on Sundays, just in case. But today isn't Sunday. It's churn day. Again. Eventually, the cream begins to thicken. You keep going. Your arms are jelly, but you keep going. When it's done, you scrape the butter into a crock, then pour off the buttermilk for baking. You allow yourself a proud smile. You made this. Something golden. Something useful. Something solid in a world full of mud. It won't last. Nothing does. But for now, it's good. You sit on the bench, fanning yourself with your apron, ignoring the throbbing in your hands. Outside, the rain begins to fall, slow and steady, dripping through the roof that leaks in the corner. You place a bucket underneath, like always. Your eldest returns, soaked and muddy, shouting about a neighbor's pig stuck in a fence. You sigh. The bread dough hasn't even risen yet, and now it's a pig rescue mission. Just another morning, but you get up. You always do. You don't own the land you work. Let's be clear. You're not farming for yourself. You are farming for a man in a stone house whose name you whisper with mild disdain. The Lord. Technically, your family holds a narrow strip of land, just enough to grow turnips, leeks, and the occasional weepy cabbage. But before you can tend to any of that, you've got to trudge to the fields he owns and work those. First, the bell tolls from the church steeple, a dull clang carried on damp air. That's your cue. You sling your tool over your shoulder, maybe a worn hoe or a short-handled spade, and follow the well-worn path with the rest of the village women. You leave your children in the care of whoever's oldest and least likely to wander into a pond. Probably your 8-year-old. She's seen things. She'll manage. The fields stretch out beyond the village, long, thin rectangles patched like a quilt. These are the open fields, divided by custom and centuries of habit, not fences. Your section is narrow, flanked by rocks and trampled wildflowers. The soil is wet, the weeds aggressive. And you, unfortunately, are in charge of convincing everything in this field to grow without threatening to quit and run into the forest screaming. You begin to hoe the ground, rhythmically, bent double at the waist. Your back protests, your knees threaten mutiny, but you keep going. Everyone around you is doing the same, bending, hacking, digging. No one talks much. The only sound is the grumble of tools and the occasional groan when someone throws out their back, trying to lift a turnip too large for its own good. A mainstream fact: under the feudal system, peasants owed labor to their lord, often 2 to 3 days a week, more during harvest. The rest of the time, they worked their own tiny plots, which sounds like a fair split until you realize the lord's land is larger, better drained, and he doesn't hoe it himself. You glance across the field and spot him, Sir Alric or Godfrey or some other name that sounds like he belongs in a tapestry. He's astride a horse, wearing boots you could feed a family with, watching everyone with the blank gaze of someone who's never been cold a day in his life. His dog, a sleek hunting thing, snarls at one of the children picking flowers too close to the road. You mutter a prayer that it doesn't bite. Again. The work is constant. Uneven terrain, stubborn roots, and a deeply unhelpful reek coming from a nearby pile of manure. You push through it, because you have to. Because this work, thankless and repetitive, keeps you in the Lord's grudging good graces. You don't want to see what happens if you fall out of favor. You hear a low chuckle behind you and immediately stiffen. It's the reeve, the Lord's watchdog, always sniffing around, always eager to report someone for shirking. He's got 3 teeth, an unfortunate squint, and a laugh that makes your neck hairs stand up. You ignore his comment. Something about how a lass like you swings a hoe like a man. Charming. You clench your jaw and move to the next row. He doesn't follow. Not today. Here's a curious tidbit. Some reeves were actually elected by the villagers, not appointed. Which sounds democratic, until you remember it was often just the loudest man who didn't mind shouting and spying on his neighbors. Historians still debate whether reeves served the community or the Lord. Most women would say both, depending on who was listening. By midday, you're drenched in sweat. Your linen shift clings to your back, and your headscarf is so soaked you could wring it out. The sun peers through the clouds like a sullen god, and everything smells of turned earth and human effort. Your hands are blistered. You pop one on a rock and keep going. A blister isn't a reason to stop. Not when there's a quota to meet. Not when the other women are still working. Falling behind means questions, and questions mean punishments. You do take small breaks, though. Pretend to tie your shoe, or adjust your apron, or wipe sweat from your brow for a full 60 seconds. Micro rests. You steal them like a child steals jam, guiltily and in small, sweet doses. Then there's the flirtation. Because of course. You glance over and catch one of the older boys making exaggerated movements with his spade, flexing dramatically every time a girl walks past. One of the young widows giggles, her scarf slipping down to reveal a scandalous inch of collarbone. You roll your eyes. That's enough romance for one afternoon. At the edge of the field, there's a spot where the weeds grow higher. You and another woman pause there to relieve yourselves. It's not private. It's just the designated area. You crouch quickly, praying the wind doesn't shift. There's no shame, just necessity. As you return, you hear someone muttering about bad omens. A crow just flew east. Or was it west? Either way, it's been a bad week for poultry. One of the hens laid an egg with 2 yolks. Definitely a sign. Of what? No one agrees, but something. You take your place back in the row, hands aching, neck sore. The soil has become a mirror for your mind, churned, rough, unyielding. But still, you work it. Because you must. Because no one else will do it for you. Eventually, the bell rings again. Afternoon, time to pack up. You wipe your hands on your apron, spit on your palms, and collect your tools. The other women rise around you like a ragged army, weary but upright. You exchange nods. No smiles. Too tired. As you shuffle back toward the village, you feel the familiar dread in your gut. The chores waiting for you at home. The hungry mouths. The spinning. The never-ending clamor of survival. But you made it through another stretch of field work. You're still here. And that, in this century, is a victory. By midday, you've returned to the village with soil in your shoes, a pebble in your sleeve, and the kind of ache in your lower back that feels personal. There's no rest waiting for you, just another form of labor, wrapped in gossip and wool. Welcome to what some might call community, and others might call a circle of overworked women trying not to snap. You duck into the shaded clearing behind Widow Alwyn's house, where the other women are already gathered. This is the unspoken village council, a group of wives, widows, and a grandmother or two, each armed with a spindle, a sewing needle, or a bucket of mending. Children scamper nearby, flinging sticks at each other. A hen clucks in irritation as someone's toddler tries to ride it. The women barely glance up. No one has the energy for new chaos. You sit on a stump that used to be a tree and probably used to be someone's stool. Your spinning bundle is a tangled mess. The wool's coarse and greasy, still smelling faintly of the sheep it came from. You begin to tease it apart with fingers that tremble from field work. The rhythm of spinning is calming. If your thoughts are anxious, your spindle catches. If your breath steadies, the wool stretches fine and smooth. You aim for smooth. Lady Marjorie is already whispering about someone's husband. Of course, it's always someone's husband. Today it's about Ellen's. He's been seen at the tavern too often, and his wife's belly is suspiciously flat for a woman supposedly blessed 2 months ago. You keep your eyes on your wool. Nothing good comes from contributing. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Medieval women believed that if you spun yarn during certain moon phases, the thread would snap more often, or invite bad luck into your home. You're not superstitious per se, but you do notice your spindle has been a brat since the last full moon. Next to you, Mistress Pippa hums as she patches a tunic for her 5th child. She does it without looking, like muscle memory. Her fingers are red and chapped, stained at the tips with berry juice and soot. She's one of the few who still smiles. Her teeth are mostly intact. A marvel. You steal glances at what the other women are doing, darning socks, sewing seams, mashing herbs into poultices for aches and complaints too numerous to list. This isn't leisure time. This is work disguised as rest. But there is something sacred in the shared silence. The way no one questions your weariness. The way they let you sit and spin and not talk for a while. Eventually, conversation drifts to the strange things. Always does. Old Bet has the eye, they say, and last week she predicted that the miller's wife would break her leg. And she did, tripped on a piglet. Theories abound. Some say Bet's part fey, others whisper darker things. She just sips her soup and looks smug. You try not to be noticed by Bet. She makes you nervous. She once told you your milk would dry up before the frost, and it did. Coincidence? You hope so. A louder voice cuts in. Milda, the loudmouth with an opinion on everything. She's talking about the goat. Again. It's always her goat. This time it's sick. She's convinced someone hexed it. Probably Widow Brenna. She always gets blamed. Too many cats. Lives alone. Never remarried after her husband choked on a plum. Historians still argue whether accusations of village magic were rooted in genuine fear or a convenient way to explain misfortune. One bad winter, and suddenly someone's crops fail because the midwife cursed them. You've learned to stay quiet and keep your doorsteps swept. A boy runs past barefoot and screeching. He's got a beetle in his hand and is threatening to put it down someone's back. You recognize him as one of yours. You shout. He ignores you. A beetle is flung. Chaos ensues. The spinning circle bursts into laughter. You can't help it either. Laughter in this space is rare but precious. A valve release. You haven't laughed like that since the pig broke into the churchyard and rooted up the bishop's herb garden. He'd yelled so loud his mitre fell off. You treasure that memory like gold. Eventually, the women settle again. You return to your work, noticing how the wool softens in your hands as it warms. The fibers stretch, twist, become thread. Magic in its way. You're turning sheep fluff into something real, something that will warm a child or barter for a loaf. You glance across at Anwin. Her fingers are blue with woad dye, and she smells faintly of vinegar and onions. She's preparing cloth to sell to a merchant who passes through once a season. She nods at you. You nod back. That's more than enough. Then there's silence. Real silence. The kind that settles when everyone is focused, when the children are distracted, and the wind is the only voice. It's rare. You savor it. Until someone's goat screams in the distance. Again. Everyone sighs. As the sun creeps higher, you know you'll have to leave soon. There's dough to knead, a pot to stir, and a child who needs delousing before supper. But for a moment, you let your spindle hum in your hand. You watch the thread grow inch by inch, your small rebellion against the chaos. You aren't just surviving, you're making something. And even if no one sings songs about you, your thread will warm someone's shoulders long after the rest forget your name. The bells toll again, twice this time. You sigh, brush bits of wool from your lap, and rise slowly from your seat. It's time for Mass. Not that you were especially eager, but attendance is expected. Legally, socially, spiritually. Skipping church isn't just a spiritual faux pas. It could get you fined, gossiped about, or accused of harboring devilish intentions. You smooth your apron, pull your veil forward, and shuffle toward the chapel with the rest of the women. The church is the tallest building in the village, which isn't saying much. It leans slightly to the left, smells strongly of incense and mildew, and features a particularly aggressive draft that makes sitting still a shivery experience. But it's sacred ground. Sort of. A place of rules and reverence, yes, but also the only place in the village where you regularly hear Latin, badly mumbled Latin, and where men wear their best tunics even if the backs are patched. As you file into the nave, you dip your fingers into the holy water at the entrance. It's cold and a little green, but you cross yourself with practiced ease. You shuffle to your usual spot, women on one side, men on the other. Children fidget in the back, picking at the wooden pews and giggling into their sleeves. You kneel. The floor is stone, always colder than expected. You try not to let your knees crack too loudly when you rise. The priest begins, his voice monotone and thick with the accent of someone who's learned Latin phonetically and under duress. You listen for keywords: Dominus, Maria, peccatum, sin, Mary, Lord. You catch the general shape of things. Forgiveness is on offer today, or maybe damnation. It's hard to tell sometimes. A mainstream historical fact: most medieval masses were spoken entirely in Latin until the later Middle Ages, leaving the congregation mostly in the dark unless someone explained it after. But even if you don't understand the words, the rhythms are familiar. Rise, kneel, bow, cross yourself. It's choreography you've memorized since girlhood. The incense burns. Your eyes water. You try not to cough. A baby starts wailing 2 rows down. No one moves. The mother looks up briefly, then rocks the child rhythmically without changing expression. She's done this before. You glance at the fresco above the altar, faded saints with elongated faces and accusing eyes. You wonder if Saint Margaret is watching you. She's the one they pray to for childbirth. You've lit candles to her before. Desperate ones. Candles you couldn't really afford. The priest coughs into his sleeve and keeps going. You zone out somewhere around the epistle reading and begin thinking about dinner. Whether you have enough barley left. Whether that turnip is still good. Whether your husband will finally patch that hole in the roof or pretend not to see it again. You shift on your knees, bones protesting. The woman next to you mutters a prayer. It sounds vaguely threatening. You pretend not to hear. Then the sermon begins, in the vernacular this time, thank heavens. A mixture of warnings and metaphors. Fire, temptation, the devil's clever tricks. Someone in the village has been disrespecting Sabbath traditions, probably by baking or singing or both. Your ears perk at the mention of women. Modesty, he says, is the jewel of the Christian housewife. You've heard this line before. He talks about how Eve led Adam astray and how a woman's silence is her greatest virtue. You nod solemnly, but inside, you think of how much louder Eve would have had to be to get anything done. A fringe tidbit for your internal trivia bank. Some women tucked notes or small charms into their shoes to bring good fortune at Mass, or even to attract a certain man's attention. You once tried putting a clover leaf in your shoe during Pentecost. It rained all day, and you stepped in something unspeakable. So much for superstition. The sermon ends. Communion begins. You've fasted since last night's supper, and your stomach growls like an angry wolf. You step forward, receive the wafer, and pray that it sticks to your soul better than it does to your tongue. The wine? Reserved for the priest. You get a sip only if something significant is happening, like Lent or pestilence. As the congregation files out, there's a buzz of murmured gossip and shuffling feet. You nod politely to the baker's wife, who returns a tight-lipped smile that says she still blames you for that flour incident last winter. You remind yourself to avoid her husband's cart for a few weeks. You step into the sunlight, blinking like a mole. It's brighter than expected, warm even. You turn your face to the sky, just for a second, letting the light hit your eyelids. Feels like forgiveness. Then your husband appears, grumbling about the state of the path. He's got mud on his knees and something that might be flour in his beard. You point him toward the firewood pile and walk the other way. Because you've got another prayer to whisper. Not the kind done on your knees in a stone chapel, but the kind whispered under your breath while washing clothes or kneading bread. You pass the village cross and pause. You touch the wood with 2 fingers. No one's looking. Just a habit. Historians still debate whether religious devotion among medieval women was genuine or simply enforced. The truth? For you, it's both. God sees you when no one else does, and sometimes that's a comfort. Sometimes it's a threat. Either way, you say your prayers, you make your peace, you go home. There's dough to punch down. The moment you return from Mass, someone is already at your door. It's Randa, the baker's sister's cousin's niece, or something like that, with red cheeks, frantic eyes, and a story you didn't ask for, but now absolutely have to deal with. Her neighbor, old Goody Frethy, is experiencing a swelling of the belly, a tightness in the chest, and an unladylike fog of the mind, which is how people around here say, she's probably dying. You grab your herbs, your worn cloth satchel, and your best concerned but not panicked face, because you're one of the women who know things, just enough to be useful, not enough to be dangerous. The inside of Freda's house smells like boiled turnips and fear. She's on the bed, a bundle of bones wrapped in a sweat-drenched sheet, muttering about snakes and Saint Apollonia. You check her eyes. Her breath is shallow. You feel her pulse, weak and fluttering. You nod, like this tells you something definitive. It doesn't. Her daughter thrusts a bowl of old garlic at you. "This is good, right?" she whispers, like she's passing you contraband. You take it, mostly because you need her to calm down. You pull out dried herbs from your satchel, valerian, yarrow, a scrap of mint. You crush them together, sprinkle them into a cup of warm ale, and whisper a blessing over the mixture. This part's more for them than for you. Then you press it to Fretha's lips. She groans, sips, gags slightly. There's talk of womb suffocation, a diagnosis that blames most female ailments on the uterus wandering around the body like a lost goat, a mainstream historical belief, horrifying and oddly imaginative. One cure involves placing sweet-smelling herbs near the woman's nose and foul ones near her feet to lure the womb back to its proper place. It's equal parts medicine, hope, and theatrical staging. You do it, of course, because what else are you going to do? You light rosemary and wave it under Freda's nose. Then you place a particularly foul onion mash by her toes. The smell is intense. Someone gags. You maintain composure, but internally, you're dying. Freda coughs, loudly, a little too dramatically, you think. But the women around you gasp with relief. "It's working," someone hisses. You let them believe it. Half of healing is convincing others that something is being done. You sit by the fire while Freda drifts into an uneasy sleep. The women start to relax. Someone brings you a crust of bread as thanks. You nibble on it slowly, pretending not to notice that it's rock hard and slightly moldy. Here's a curious fringe fact. Some medieval cures involved placing crushed emeralds under the tongue, or using crocodile dung as a facial treatment. Thankfully, no one in your village has that kind of budget or imagination. The worst you've seen is someone rubbing goose grease and nettle juice onto a rash while chanting the Lord's Prayer backward. You pack up your things, wipe your hands on your apron, and nod at the daughter. She'll rest now. but keep her warm and maybe don't let the cat sleep on her face again." She nods solemnly, as if that had been the problem all along. You return home to find your children arguing over who gets the last of the parsnip mash. Your husband is asleep against the wall. You resist the urge to throw a spoon at him. Barely. The afternoon light is waning. You toss a few twigs into the hearth, coaxing the flames back to life. The smell of rosemary clings to your sleeves. You glance at the shelf where your small collection of healing things lives. A dried frog in a pouch, a cracked jar of honey, a braid of garlic that's more charm than seasoning, a small wooden figure of Saint Hildegard, patroness of wisdom, with her nose chipped off. You've whispered more secrets to her than to your own mother. You never meant to be a healer. It just happened. You remembered things, watched the midwives, listened during births, paid attention to which leaves stung and which soothed. Now people trust you, which is both an honor and a risk. Historians still argue whether female healers were respected or feared, whether they served their communities or walked a razor's edge between folk knowledge and accusations of witchcraft. You'd argue it's all three, depending on how good your last cure was and whether someone's cow died that week. You once cured a cough with nothing but thyme tea and quiet confidence. People called you a miracle worker. Another time, a man's wart fell off after he rubbed it with raw bacon and walked backward around a tree. You told him it was his faith, not the bacon. He didn't believe you. You hear a knock. Another neighbor. This time it's a toothache. You sigh, dig into your pouch, and hand over a clove to chew. She thanks you like it's gold. You close the door gently behind her and lean against it. Your back hurts. Your hands smell like garlic and old wool. But for now, no one's screaming. No one's bleeding. No one's died. That's a good day. You sit by the hearth and stretch your legs toward the fire. Your youngest climbs into your lap, sticky fingers clutching a wooden doll you carved from a turnip stem. You stroke her hair. She smells like bread and pond water. Outside, someone sneezes. Loudly. You hear someone else mutter, "It begins." You close your eyes and pretend you didn't hear. You're always either pregnant, recovering from pregnancy, or praying you're not pregnant. That's the cycle. There's no break, no reliable way to stop it. You glance down at your belly, not swelling yet, thank heavens, and exhale through your nose. Just 1 month where your womb doesn't rule the conversation. Is that too much to ask? Spoiler, yes, it is. In your village, fertility is a full-time job. Every woman is expected to bear children, and as many as possible. Boys are blessings. Girls are future workers. Babies are temporary. If they survive past their 5th birthday, you let yourself get attached. There's no such thing as privacy when it comes to your body. Your neighbors know your cycle better than you do. You skip 1 period, and suddenly the entire village is watching your waistline. You throw up once and Goody Elm swears it's the second coming. You crave onions and 3 women give you blankets and start debating your due date. A mainstream historical truth. Medieval women often gave birth more than 10 times in their lives. High infant mortality meant you had to try often just to raise a handful of children into adulthood. Many women died doing so. Childbirth was as common as it was deadly. And fear lived in your womb, rent-free. You sit on the bench, fingers busy with needlework, when your hips twinge again. You shift, trying to stretch the ache out of them. It doesn't help. Nothing helps. Your body is a workshop, and the tools are always dull. when your monthly bleeding comes, it arrives like a warning bell. You've got one more month of freedom. One more month where you aren't vomiting into hedges or preparing a birthing pallet. But even then, you're not free. Periods are messy, uncomfortable, and treated with the same hushed reverence as a church secret. You use moss sometimes, or cloth scraps, or wadded wool. You wash them out in a separate bucket out of sight. If anyone sees, you mutter a prayer. Some say bleeding women spoil food, curdle milk, or summon wolves. You don't believe it, but you don't tempt it either. You heard of a merchant's wife once, rich, from the city, who tried something called a sponge. Imported. She died of a fever a week later. Some say it was the sponge. Some say it was heresy. You stick with moss. A fringe tidbit. In certain abbeys, monks kept detailed records of menstruation cycles for the nuns under their care, trying to map their bodies like seasons. You shudder at the thought of anyone tracking your cycles with quill and ink. You barely keep track yourself. You just know when the ache starts, and the bread goes stale faster. Time to hide the good sheets. Your husband doesn't understand it. Not really. He tries to stay out of the way during those days. He doesn't want to hear about cramps or bleeding or the existential dread of pushing another human out of your pelvis. That's women's business. You're fine with that mostly, except when he forgets you're not made of iron and tries to tug you into bed anyway. You tell him no. He sulks. Sometimes you have to stop being polite and raise your voice. Sometimes that's not enough. Consent isn't a word anyone uses here. Not for wives. Your body is his right. At least, that's what they all say. You go quiet after those nights. You walk stiffly. You scrub things too hard. You pretend nothing happened. Because if you start crying, you might not stop. Historians still argue whether medieval marriage was considered a contract of mutual duty or male dominance. The church preached restraint. The culture ignored it. What's whispered behind closed doors rarely makes it into the records. Sometimes you think about the midwives, the old ones who know how to mix pennyroyal or rue into teas, not to help a pregnancy, but to end it. Quietly. Dangerously. You've never asked. You don't know if you'd have the courage. But you think about it. You press your palm to your lower belly. Flat, for now. But for how long? Your eldest daughter watches you from the doorway. She's 10, maybe 11. Sharp eyes. Smarter than most boys already. You dread the day someone notices. You dread the day someone says her hips are widening, that she'd make a fine bride. You dread the coins that might change hands. Because marriage isn't romance here, it's math. How many goats is she worth? How much land will we get? Will the family have bread in winter? You were married off at 14. You can still feel the cold that crept into your bones on your wedding night. You blink away the memory. Smile at your daughter. She doesn't smile back. Instead, she walks over and presses a flower into your hand. A wilted daisy. You nod. She nods back. And then she's gone. You clutch that daisy like a secret. Something soft in a world made of stone. You go back to your needlework. The thread slips once, tangling in your lap. You yank it straight, then pause. Your womb twinges again. The days blur, but you remember feast days because they're loud, messy, joyous in the way a starving belly is joyous at the sight of crusts and gravy. But they're rare and unpredictable. Today might be one, or tomorrow, or maybe not at all. The calendar is controlled by the church, the weather, and the whims of whoever's in charge of remembering which saint got martyred that month. But when it is a feast day, the village transforms. Smoke pours from ovens that normally sit cold. The smell of baking bread, real bread, maybe even with spices, sneaks down the lanes like a rumor. Someone's got eel. Someone else brings out a chunk of preserved ham from deep in a crock. A jug of ale makes its way from neighbor to neighbor, passing through hands like a sacred relic. Your house? It smells like hope. You've cleaned, even scrubbed. The children wear their best, which mostly means less patched. You lit candles last night, real ones, not just rushlights. You even let the little ones have a dab of berry juice on their cheeks, pretending it's rouge. They giggled. You smiled. For a moment, it feels like something better. You bring out the stew you've been saving ingredients for. 3 leeks, a heel of cheese, dried herbs, and yes, even a little bacon. You don't taste it. Not yet. You wait. Everyone else eats first. You always wait. The church bells ring longer. People gather near the village green. There might be music. Someone's cousin has a fiddle that mostly works, and dancing if the rain holds off. You step outside, heart light for the first time in weeks. You're greeted by a dozen smells: roasting fowl, sweat, mud, wet wool, and flowers braided into hair. Your neighbors are smiling, even laughing. You see your husband talking to the reeve and not immediately scowling. That's how you know it's truly a feast day. A mainstream fact: medieval peasants had more official days off than many modern workers due to feast days honoring saints and religious events. But, and here's the rub, these were rarely restful. They meant extra church, extra meals to prepare, and social obligations that could drain even the most resilient. Still, you find joy. You join the dance. Slowly at first, then with more confidence. You spin, not like a noblewoman at court, but like a mother who's still got rhythm, damn it. Your veil slips a little. You don't fix it. Let the breeze have it. You're smiling. That rare kind of smile that starts in the chest and works its way to your lips when you think, I might be okay today. Then the rain comes. Of course it does. The sky, previously cheerful, breaks open like an egg. People scatter. The musicians scramble to protect their instruments. A roast chicken is forgotten under a tree. You grab a child under each arm and run for shelter beneath the nearest eave, laughing the whole way. Then come the famine days. Because every feast casts a shadow. Your grain stores run low. The cheese mold spreads too fast. Your onions sprout when they should be drying. And when the Lord's men come to collect their share, they don't care how much joy you had last week. They want their due. You give up a sack of barley and pretend you don't hear your stomach growl. It gets quieter in the house, hungrier. The stew thins, the bread shrinks. You chew slower to make it last longer. You tell the children to chew each bite 10 times, like it's a game. You smile when they ask, will there be meat tomorrow? And say, we'll see, when the real answer is no. You chew dry bread that splinters your gums and remind yourself, it's not always like this. But it is, isn't it? One winter, you boiled bark. Just once. It didn't work, but it felt like trying. Another time, a family down the lane baked a cat. You try not to think about that one. You didn't eat it, but you thought about it. And that's bad enough. You hear your husband snoring at night, stomach half full, unaware that you gave him your portion. You don't tell him. You don't want the argument. Men hunger differently, loudly. Historians still debate the true frequency of peasant famines. Some claim they were rare, tied only to failed harvests. Others argue that minor famines, weeks of near starvation, were as common as frost on the windows. You lean toward the latter, not because you've read a book, because you've lived the silence of a cold pantry. During the hardest weeks, you light candles, not for prayer, for light. You read your children bedtime stories carved into memory, parables, rhymes, whispered legends. You make up parts when you forget the endings. You kiss their foreheads and hum lullabies in the dark. One night, your youngest asks if the saints get hungry. You say no. Another asks if they can eat the candle wax. You say no to that too, but you understand the question. There are good days again. Eventually, someone trades you a goose. You bake it slowly, lovingly, stuffed with garlic and hope. You save every drop of fat. You use the bones for broth. It tastes like victory. You think about the feast days as you eat it. You think about the dancing, the laughter, the way your skirt lifted just enough for someone to see your ankle and gasp like you'd cursed aloud. You chew slowly, then smile. Today, at least, is not a famine day. It creeps up on you. A vague ache low in your belly, a tenderness in your back, a restlessness in your legs like they're ready to walk away without you. Then it comes, hot, relentless, and miserable. Your monthly bleeding. Again. You knew it was coming. You always do. But that doesn't make it easier. You retreat to the corner of the house where your rags are kept in a small wooden box wrapped in old linen. They're coarse, they stain easily, and you wash them in secret. No one speaks of them. Not in the house. Not anywhere. You're bleeding, but you're also pretending you're not. You stuff one between your legs, tie a cloth belt around your waist to hold it in place, and hope it stays. Sometimes it doesn't. Then it's shame, a visible stain, a knowing smirk, a hissed whisper from someone who thinks she's cleaner than you. It's not just physical discomfort. It's ritual uncleanliness. Some people still think a menstruating woman can sour milk or kill crops with a glance. You laugh at it outwardly, but inside you wonder, if the cheese curdles today, will they blame you? A mainstream historical fact. In many parts of medieval Europe, menstruation was considered both necessary and dangerous. Church doctrine often painted it as a symbol of Eve's original sin, a monthly reminder of woman's weakness and moral frailty. You carry it not just in your womb, but in your reputation. Today is washing day, of course, because the universe has no sense of timing. You bend over the washboard, scrubbing shirts and smocks while cramps stab you with quiet rage. Your back throbs. You shift positions constantly. It doesn't help. The children run past, shrieking. You want to yell but can't find the strength, so you let them chase each other through the yard while you press damp clothes onto the line, one clothespin at a time. The breeze is kind. Almost. You breathe. You endure. Someone shouts from the lane. The stew's burned. You grit your teeth, drop the last of the linens into the basket, and shuffle back inside, legs clenched against the threat of leaking. The stew is only a little scorched. You scrape off the top layer, stir in some herbs, and serve it with a neutral face. They eat it. No one thanks you. Your husband complains about the salt. You stare at him for 3 seconds too long. He notices, doesn't comment. Later, while the children nap and the fire smolders low, you lie on the floor, knees drawn to your chest, a pile of soft moss beneath you. Not comfortable, just softer than stone. A fringe tidbit. In some Slavic villages, women were forbidden to touch icons or attend church while menstruating. Others required you to bathe in river water before rejoining public life. You tried that once, in winter. It didn't go well. You curl around your stomach and whisper a prayer, not to stop the bleeding, you know it must come, but to hurry it along, to bring the end a little sooner. Each hour feels like a day, each day a slow unraveling. You try not to snap at the children. They sense your short fuse and cling to the edges of the room. Your eldest offers to stir the soup. You nod. She doesn't ask why your eyes look shiny. Outside, the other women are gathering again. Some carry baskets of wool, others pails of ash water for laundry. You stay in. Today, you are not a participant. Today, you are an aching husk with responsibilities. Historians still argue how much autonomy medieval women had during their periods, whether they were sent away or simply suffered in silence. The truth is likely both. In some villages, women had private huts. In others, they just powered through. You keep going. No one gives you a break. You wouldn't know what to do with one if they did. You distract yourself by spinning thread. It's slow today. The fibers snag. Your fingers tremble. The spindle jerks in your palm and the thread snaps. You sigh, toss it aside, and start over. Again. Always again. By evening, the bleeding is heavier. You change the moss. Burn the old piece in the hearth. You don't tell anyone. You never do. You sleep with a folded rag between your legs, praying you won't stain the bedding. You already have. You turn it over and pretend not to notice. Your dreams are strange, vivid. You're running through a field of poppies, barefoot and unbothered. The sky is red. The flowers are red. You wake to cramps, of course. The pain feels older than you, ancient, passed down from mother to daughter like an unwelcome heirloom. You brew yourself a tea, sage, a little yarrow, and a dried plum if you have it. It helps, a bit. At least the warmth feels like something. Your youngest wakes with a fever that night. You rock her for hours, bleeding into your last clean rag, whispering lullabies in the dark. Her forehead is hot. Her breath rasps. You try not to think of saints or coffins, just rock and hum and bleed. By the fourth day, the flow starts to slow. Your mind clears. Your body begins to feel like something you can live inside again. You wash yourself in cold water. You scrub your legs, your arms, your belly. You don't feel clean, but you feel lighter. You walk outside barefoot. The mud squishes. You don't care. You sit by the well and let the sun kiss your face. You survived another cycle, another judgment, another wave of discomfort with no name. You glance back at your home, where children scream and bread burns. You go back in, because the bleeding may have stopped, but the work never does. Marriage, for you, wasn't a choice. It was a transaction. A few sheep, maybe a corner of a field, a small sack of oats. You were the goods, dressed in your finest linen, hair braided and eyes lowered like a proper bride. You were 14, maybe 15. Old enough, they said. Ripe, like fruit. No one asked if you felt ready. You remember the wedding, muddy, loud, and full of bread. People sang off-key. The priest rushed the vows because a storm was coming. You were given a silver coin to tuck into your shoe. You lost it walking back to the cottage you'd never seen before. Your new home smelled different. New hearth, new dirt. A husband who smelled like barley and nervous sweat. He grunted something like affection and handed you a jug of weak ale. That was the end of courtship, the beginning of forever. On your honeymoon, if you can call it that, you churned butter. No kisses, no flowers, just sour milk and a heavy wooden paddle. Your hands blistered. Your shoulders ached. You didn't complain. This was the role. A mainstream historical fact. Marriage in the medieval world was primarily an economic contract. Love was irrelevant. Wives were expected to manage the household, bear children, and help in the fields. That was the job. The ceremony was a legal arrangement, and in many places, just mutual consent was enough to declare it done. No priest required. Your husband wasn't cruel. Not exactly, just used to the system. You were a helper, a body, a dowry. You learned his moods quickly. Which tone meant don't speak, which look meant the barley failed again. You learned to cook what he liked. You laughed at his jokes. You bit your tongue until it bled. Your first year was the hardest. New soil, new expectations, new neighbors. You were watched closely, judged constantly. Were you working enough? Was your husband eating well? Were you pregnant yet? You weren't. Not that year. People noticed. Whispers slithered behind your back. Maybe you were barren. Maybe cursed. Maybe your mother lied about your age. One widow gave you a pouch of herbs to steep in goat's milk. She said it would soften your womb. It just gave you cramps. Eventually, your belly swelled. Relief and fear. Labor is always lurking. Even now, years later, every time you pass the field where you delivered your second child, on your knees gripping a tree root, you remember the blood. So much blood. But she lived. And so did you. That time. You became a wife in full after that, more than a girl in a veil. You were mistress of house so-and-so, which mostly meant managing 1,000 chores and answering for your husband's debts. If he took a loan, you learned to stretch a meal from nothing. If he drank too much, you guided him to bed and told the children he was tired. Marriage is not a partnership here. It is a daily negotiation. He works the fields, yes, but you do everything else. Cooking, cleaning, hauling water, spinning, patching, child rearing, animal tending, herb mixing, praying. And when he's sick, you do his work too. A fringe tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, there were festivals where couples could test out marriages for a year before deciding to make them permanent. It sounds romantic until you realize women were rarely the ones allowed to opt out. And children born in those trial periods still counted against you. You once saw a couple divorced, unusual, but possible, because the woman couldn't hold her tongue. She spoke too much. You remember her well. Loud, funny, with red cheeks and clever hands. She vanished one day. No one said where. Sometimes you envy widows. Is that wrong? They get respect, control. They can manage land, run shops, make decisions. No one tells them to stay quiet at dinner. No one makes them lie down when they don't want to. But widowhood comes with its own risks. A single woman with property is a target. A single woman with no property is a burden. You've heard of widows married off to distant cousins or forced into convents with little more than a wool shift and a bowl. Love? It's something you see in the eyes of your children when you fix their shoes, or in the quiet gift of a chicken from a neighbor during a hard winter. Not between spouses. Not in this house. Your husband brings home a bundle of kindling without being asked. You nod. It's the most affection you've exchanged in days, but it means something. Maybe. At night, you sleep beside him, back to back. His snores fill the room. You lie awake sometimes, counting the ceiling beams, listening to mice skitter in the rafters. You wonder if the mouse has a mate. Probably. Everything pairs off eventually. You rise before he does. You light the fire. You stir the pot. You keep the house warm and the children fed. You are a wife, a mother, a barter chip turned caretaker, and still somehow a woman. There's a silence in the village today, not the peaceful kind, the expectant, twitchy kind. The air feels tight, like the moment before a storm, or just after someone drops a plate, and no one knows who will get blamed. You keep your head down. You hear whispers before you see the crowd, a cluster of neighbors near the chapel, arms folded, mouths taut. They lean close when they speak, glancing over their shoulders every few seconds. That's never a good sign. Someone's been accused. Of what? Doesn't matter. Once a name is spoken, it takes on a life of its own. Could be witchcraft, could be adultery, could be that she looked the wrong way during Mass. The reasons shift. The outcome stays the same. Judgment. You spot her eventually, Mistress Elspeth, sitting outside her home, peeling parsnips like she doesn't know the village is sharpening pitchforks with their eyes. She's young, maybe too young to be a widow, maybe too pretty to be left alone. Maybe she was simply too confident with her opinions during spinning circle. You feel the eyes on you too. Not now, but recently. Last week, you mentioned St. Margaret during a planting discussion. Someone said your tone was knowing. What does that mean? A mainstream historical fact, accusations of witchcraft in the medieval period were not always about actual magic. Often, they were about social tension, envy, or control. Women who spoke too freely, healed too well, or lived alone were easy targets. Some faced trial. Others were simply removed. The Reeve walks by, chewing a sprig of mint like it's a statement. He nods at no one. He knows. Everyone does. Elspeth's fate is sealed. No one will say her name aloud now, not without a hand sign or muttered prayer. Later that day, you hear shouting. Then nothing. You don't go to the window. You keep your hands busy. That's the safest thing you can do. Idle hands draw attention. Talking too much. Dangerous. Laughing too loud. Suspicious. Owning more herbs than your neighbor. Might as well write sorcery on your forehead. But the dangers aren't always cloaked in hoods and mutterings. Sometimes it's just a wrong word in the wrong ear. You remember the baker's wife, Aelith, who made the mistake of smiling at a young man during the spring festival. A month later, someone told her husband. He beat her in the square, said it was justice. You watched, your face calm, your stomach a knot. She wore a veil over her bruises for a week. Then she vanished. Her sister said she'd gone to visit kin in the next shire. You didn't ask questions. The rules are invisible but heavy. Don't whistle on Sundays. Don't wear green after Pentecost. Don't sweep your doorstep counterclockwise. Don't look the priest in the eye during confession. Don't. A fringe tidbit. In some villages, people believed that if a woman dreamed of crows 3 nights in a row, she was fated to bring death, or was in league with it. You once dreamed of crows. You told no one. You walk through the village, eyes down, shawl tight. You pass the alehouse and pretend not to hear the joke the Reeve makes about your hips. You ignore the giggles. If you respond, you're proud. If you don't, you're cold. A boy throws a clump of mud at a girl. It hits her shoulder. She snarls, throws one back, and chases him. You envy her clarity. Childhood is the last time you're allowed to be honest. You reach the market stand and trade eggs for salt. The merchant eyes your basket and raises an eyebrow. Too many herbs in there, mistress. You smile politely. They're for soup. Of course. He doesn't believe you, but he takes the eggs. Historians still argue whether these small daily suspicions created an atmosphere of chronic fear or if they were just the backdrop of peasant life. You know the answer. It's both. You learn to live inside fear like a second skin. You adapt. Evening comes. You light a candle, kneel at the edge of your pallet, and whisper prayers you no longer fully understand. You don't ask for safety, just invisibility. That's safer. Your husband comes in later, breath heavy with ale. He slurs something about your cooking and lies down without undressing. You tuck the blanket over his shoulder and stare at the rafters, wondering if the mice are nesting again. The wind howls outside, rattling the shutter. The village is quiet, but it's the kind of quiet that listens, waits. You hear footsteps outside your house, then nothing. You don't breathe. Eventually, they fade. You let out your breath in one long, careful exhale. You think of Elspeth again. You hope she's far away. Or, if not far, at least at peace. Tomorrow, someone else will be watched. Someone else will talk too much. Someone else will wear the wrong color or gather the wrong route at dusk. You will nod, smile, say the right thing. You will survive. Because surviving here means being small enough not to be seen, but strong enough to hold the world on your back. You're not sure when it happened exactly, when you shifted from young wife to that older woman by the well. It snuck up on you like moss creeping over a stone, quiet, inevitable, and slightly damp. Your hair, once chestnut and long enough to braid with ribbons, now coils in wiry gray strands beneath your veil. Your back curves more than it should, not in a way anyone comments on directly, but in the way the younger women rush to lift baskets for you now. It stings, a little. You're still strong, still useful, but your body whispers otherwise, loudly. You cough when you wake up, every morning, deep and rattling. Sometimes it tastes of iron. You chew a clove, swish with weak ale, and carry on. You always carry on. Your hands are rough, patchworked with small scars from years of cutting, spinning, kneading, and cleaning. Your knees ache when it rains. Your eyesight dims at dusk. And still, the children scream. The bread must be made, and someone's goat is always stuck somewhere it shouldn't be. You glance in the polished metal plate you once used to signal to a traveling merchant. It shows a face with deeper lines and softer eyes than you remember. You poke your cheek gently. The skin doesn't spring back like it used to. You're 40. Maybe. You stopped counting after your second miscarriage. Dates blur when survival is the only calendar you follow. A mainstream fact, many women in the Middle Ages didn't live past 40. And those who did often slipped into social invisibility. Menopause marked the end of not only fertility, but, in many ways, public relevance. No longer a maiden, no longer a mother-to-be. Just there. And yet, you are needed. You're the one they come to when the bread won't rise or the baby won't latch. You know which herbs reduce fever and which mushrooms kill goats. You've seen more births than the priest has sermons. You are a living almanac, a breathing ledger of what works and what doesn't. But they don't always thank you. Your advice is received with gratitude, yes, but not reverence. Not anymore. Reverence is reserved for saints and youth. You're just the old one now. The one with the stubborn toothache and the opinions on turnip storage. Some whisper you've grown odd, that you speak to yourself when you work in the garden, that your laugh sounds too much like cackling. You laugh anyway, loudly. A fringe tidbit. In some parts of medieval Europe, older women were seen as closer to the spiritual world, sometimes revered as wise women, sometimes feared as witches. The line between healer and heretic grew thinner with age, especially if you lived alone, especially if your cat followed you everywhere. You've begun talking to your herbs, mostly because they don't interrupt you. You hum to your leeks. You scold the parsley when it wilts. You murmur secrets to the rosemary by the doorframe. It listens better than your husband ever did. Your husband, what's left of him, is quieter now. He still eats too loudly and refuses to fix the shutter that bangs during storms, but his legs are stiff. His memory is foggy. You remind him where his boots are more than you'd like. He forgets names. You correct him gently. You tuck him in when he dozes by the hearth. He's soft now, not in body, though that too, but in spirit. His temper, once sharp as a new blade, has dulled. He apologizes more, holds your hand when he forgets why he's sad. You let him. It's not love, but it's familiar. Your children are half grown. One has already left for the next village, married off to a cooper. You hope he's kind. You hope she still sings. Another is apprenticed to the smithy, hands already larger than yours. The smallest still clings to your skirts, asking impossible questions. You tell her the saints know everything. She accepts this, for now. You watch the younger women with a complicated heart, their smooth skin, their straight backs, their scornful glances when you mention vinegar for cleaning wounds or onion poultices for colds. You know they'll learn. Everyone does. You were them once. You rolled your eyes at the old widow who swore by burying hair under a hawthorn tree. You didn't listen. Then your hair started falling out, and suddenly the tree seemed friendlier. Historians still debate whether medieval crones held true authority or symbolic power in the village hierarchy. You say both. You hold the baby and the burial shroud with the same hands. You offer comfort and caution in equal measure. That's power, even if no one says so. You spend more time in your garden now, less in the fields. Your knees argue with every climb, but you can still pull weeds, still shake the seeds from a drying pod like a spell. You've named your best hen. You won't tell anyone her name. Not because it's a secret, but because they'll laugh. You don't feel like explaining why she listens when no one else does. You once wanted to run away, far beyond the hills, into the forest. Maybe become one of those women people tell stories about, wild-haired and free. But you stayed, because someone had to, because leaving didn't feel brave. It felt cruel. Now you are the one they come to when things fall apart, when the child has a fever, when the bread turns black, when a scream is heard in the night. You listen. You nod. You hold. You are the crone now, a word they won't say aloud, but they mean it, with every glance, every request, every whispered, "What do you think, mistress?" You think you've earned it. And though your bones groan, and your teeth loosen, and your hair no longer shines, you are still here, still spinning thread, still holding the world together one stitch at a time. It begins with a cough. Always a cough. Not yours this time, though that's still a daily companion, but someone else's. Loud, wet, unmistakably wrong. You hear it from the edge of the village. The sound cuts through the morning, like a blade through butter. Then another cough. Then a cry. And just like that, the village begins to die. No one says plague yet. They call it the sickness, The fever, the bad air. They burn rosemary in every doorway. The priest rings the bells twice daily instead of once. Everyone pretends it's for extra prayer, but you know the pattern. More tolls, more deaths. You gather herbs without speaking. Marigold, sage, garlic. Not because they'll cure anyone, but because they smell like trying. A mainstream historical truth. When death came, it came fast. Entire villages were emptied in weeks, sometimes days. Medicine couldn't help. Prayers didn't always answer. Most people just waited and hoped it passed over their house like a storm skipping a field. Your husband's fever starts slow. You sponge his forehead with linen soaked in vinegar. He moans, thrashes. You say nothing. You just keep wiping. The children grow silent. Even the youngest stops asking questions. They sit in corners, wide-eyed, listening for signs of breath that sounds wrong. Neighbors stop knocking. Food stops arriving. The world contracts to your doorstep. You eat suspicious cheese. Not because it's appetizing, but because it's all you have left. You slice off the mold, scrape away the green, and chew slowly. Every bite is defiance. The priest visits once. He brings holy water, mutters a blessing, and doesn't look anyone in the eye. He coughs as he leaves. You don't say goodbye. You feel your own fever come, not like a storm, but like a tide. Gentle, rising, irrefutable. Your body feels heavy and distant. Your fingers tingle. Your breath grows short. You lie down. Not because you want to, because there's nowhere else to go. The children watch you from across the room. You smile. Tell them it's fine. They don't believe you. They shouldn't. You think about the life you had, all the days that bled into each other, the years spent spinning, scrubbing, lifting, soothing, kneading, surviving. It wasn't glorious, but it was yours. A fringe historical tidbit. Some believed a woman's soul would linger in her home for 3 days after death, sweeping corners and checking door latches. You like that. You hope it's true. You wonder if someone will light candles, lay out a cloth, say your name out loud. You hope they don't forget your thread, the one you were spinning yesterday. It's still on the spindle, tension halfway drawn. You breathe slower now. You think of your mother. You think of your youngest daughter, her muddy smile. You think of butter on warm bread. Once, a long time ago. You close your eyes, and in the softest corners of your mind, something eases. Something lets go. The hearth glows faintly, casting warm, flickering shadows on the uneven stone walls. The storm has passed, or maybe it's still far away, softened by the hush that blankets everything. Outside, a breeze slips through the shutters, cool, steady, familiar. It smells faintly of time. You are still. Everything is quiet now. The tools rest where you left them. The spindle has stopped spinning. The bread dough sleeps beneath a cloth. The world, at last, has given you a moment to pause. Time stretches here, like wool drawn smooth between careful fingers. The aches fade, the noise settles. Even the memories, once sharp, now settle like gentle embers in your chest. Warm, not painful. You've done enough. You've carried children, borne grief, survived hunger, endured injustice. You've whispered prayers with no answers and still lit candles the next morning. You've known what it is to lose and to love without needing a word for it. Now in the fading light, the silence is no longer lonely. It is sacred, the kind earned only after a life of steady labor, of small joys, of moments stolen in the dark and laughter hidden behind hands. There is no more rushing. No more scraping or sewing or fearing. Just breathe, just stillness, just peace. Let yourself drift. Let the hum of the night take you. Let the past settle into story, and the story become a dream. You've done enough. You are enough. Sleep now.